Everyone, I'm Matthew DeSantis.
Hey everybody, I'm Acacia Clement.
Welcome to the latest episode of Snowbirds. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming back to another episode of Snowbirds, where myself and Acacia Clement go over some of the great racing that's taking place in the state of Florida. Admittedly, I might be stuck up here in New York, where maybe there was some white on the ground this morning when I woke up, but Acacia's down there at Tampa covering some of the really exciting races we have this weekend at Tampa Bay Downs, including the Kentucky Derby prep Sam F. Davis. Acacia, how are you doing, and how are things down in Florida?
I'm good. I'm at my house in Palm City in the moment, and we're in the 80s this week, so I'm sorry. Usually, when we've done this show so far this winter, it's been on the cooler side for Florida standards, but within the past week, it's really heated up down here, which is nice for us. So we think warm thoughts for all of you up north there, and yeah, we're enjoying the sunshine while it's here. I did
Well,
get
hey,
I've gotten a glove tan from riding outside. Like I look like a golfer, which is odd, but yeah. So that just goes to show you that the weather has changed.
Yeah, you're just hitting the links in the afternoon.
Yeah,
You know, just
yeah.
just straight from Christoph's barn to the link. So that's no, that's great. I love the glove. Yeah, the glove tan. That is a sign of Florida. Let me tell you, everybody's got a glove tan down
I
there.
know, I know,
Uh,
I know. I didn't even think of it because, I personally like to wear gloves while riding, and
yeah.
I was like, "What is happening to me here?" Yeah.
I know. I wear flip flops, and I wear flip flops pretty much all year round, or a lot of the year, and so I will always have like the V sun
Okay,
on
okay.
my foot. And so yeah, if people see that, they're like, what's going on there? I'm like, I used to live in Florida a long time. Anyway, listen, folks, thank you again for tuning in. Like I said, we're going to cover some exciting races at Tampa Bay Downs for this weekend. Here at NYRA Bets, we have a money back guarantee for the Sam F. Davis. If you put a $10 win bet down on a horse and that horse finishes second or third, you get your $10 back. Obviously, if the horse wins, hey, congratulations, winning ticket for you. And hopefully Acacia and I can give you some ideas in that Sam F. Davis to connect you to a winning ticket in that race. But Acacia, you're going to be doing a lot of coverage down there at Tampa for their big day, for America's Day at the races. When can folks expect to see you on TV?
Yeah, Saturday will be on from 3 to 6 on FS2. So we start at race 7 and through the end. So won't have all the stakes, but most of them, and of course the big one with the Sam F. Davis, and came up a big field of 10, really competitive race as far as that 3-year-old prep is concerned, and really looking forward to it. I always love going to Tampa. It's such a fun racetrack, and between this and Tampa Bay Derby Day, kind of their two really big days of the winter, and they really roll out the red carpet and make it such a great experience for everybody there.
They really do. Can't emphasize that enough. Can't second that enough. Used to live near Tampa Bay Downs, go out for their big days. Always enjoyed that track, and easy access to get to. I've always enjoyed it. You can get to the beach in about 20 minutes from there as well. So it's a great track, and it definitely encourage our friends down in Florida. If you're out near the track, make sure to swing by on Saturday for their big day. But we do have a big card, and there's some big names on the undercard. In particular, you have a horse that's Bill Mott horse that is the son of Songbird that's debuting, so that gets a lot of attention. There's some other Triple Crown nominated horses that are running in debut on the undercard as well. So top to bottom, going to be a really exciting day.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. And Songbird is great as a race mare as she has not been a good producer as of yet. And, haven't gotten to see much. And oftentimes that can happen with those really elite race mares, that they're not necessarily the best brood mares. But that one, $1 million son of Curlin. So there's obviously a blue blood pedigree there. So we'll see how it pans out. But there's a couple other very interestingly bred and expensive horses in that race too. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into the stakes action. And we'll kick things off in the Pelican Stakes, which is going 6 furlongs on the dirt for 4-year-olds and up. And this is a field of 7. And I think a lot of people are going to be drawn to the name Nutella for Gary Contessa, 2-1, your morning line favorite. Caramel Chip for Carlos David at 5-2. And a horse that's always, I think, run well at Tampa Bay, Dreaming of Kona at 6-1 as well for Aldana Spieth. This is an interesting field of 7. I think a competitive race. I think some people might look at Nutella and think maybe that's the single or a horse that you can really lean on maybe in some tickets. Interested in your thoughts on how you looked at this race and how you kind of ranked up the leading contenders.
Well, I think Nutella Fellow ran a lot better last time out than maybe I think many people might have anticipated. And it's really encouraging to see him come back in just a little under a month for his next start, because he obviously was good as a 2-year-old winning the Hopeful, then was sidelined, only ran once as a 3-year-old, finishing third in the Woody Stevens, where yes, he did have a bit of a meltdown to run at there. And then we see him back not again until the start of his 4-year-old season. So it's a little bit tricky to get a read on him because he can't stay on the racetrack. Sorry, my cat Pippin cannot decide if he wants to be up or down. So he started fussing during that. But
Pippin can do whatever he wants.
he always has to get in the video whenever we do this. Anyway, as far as Bella, it's really encouraging to see him come back quickly off the back of that second place finish. And I liked the horse that beat him that day. I thought he had the recency edge. He had the foundation. Nutella Fella had some really strong workouts coming in, but probably needed the race for fitness. And I really thought it would be a big telling race if we were going to see him come back pretty quickly, which we are. So for me, that's a huge positive sign with how Nutella Fella's doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned some strong workouts before. He's also had some strong workouts since that race, recording a couple of bullet works leading up to this one. A 48 flat, first out of 142 on January 26th, and then another bullet, admittedly just a short 3 furlong one, 34 and 3, first to 12. So certainly seems like Gary's tightening the screws, and this was always kind of maybe the focus, is to get this horse in this race and set this horse up for a little bit of a longer campaign, as we'll see him this year. And I think people forget that he finished third in that Woody Stevens because there was such a pace meltdown, and there was so much focus on Bookham Dano and Prince of Monaco and those top two. But yeah, he ran a huge race that day as well. So definitely a horse that I think is going to be tough to beat. A horse coming off a pretty long layoff is Dreaming of Kona, but this is a horse that, when this horse runs on the dirt, tends to run pretty well. And I remember this horse running well at Tampa Bay before. And so I don't know if this horse has any chance, but I think it's 6-1. It'll be interesting to see how the horse runs off the layoff. But I don't know. There's if you can't really land on Nutella Fella or trust that one, I don't know if I really trust Caramel Chip that much. And so trying to find an alternative is a little bit tricky.
I agree. Caramel Chip is a really tough one for me. Uh, he's a horse I think that kind of sometimes looks a little bit better than he is. And Dreaming of Kona, yes, he has the layoff to contend with, and he has run well at Tampa. You're right. It's just that he's coming in off this layoff in not as strong form as he
Yeah.
has with previous layoffs or previous races at Tampa. So for me, it's a little bit up in the air. I think if it's not Nutella Fella, I think it's kind of anybody's game.
Yeah, absolutely. Wide open race there in race number 5 in the Pelican. We'll move on to the Minaret, the very next race, race number 6 on the card. This one's for the fillies and mares, again going 6 furlongs over the main track, a field of 8 in this race. And again, I feel like this is a race where a lot of people are going to be drawn to that morning line favorite, Nick Style. This is a really good horse for Bill Mott, and one that I was dead wrong about up in Saratoga. Kind of tried to play against this horse, and man, just ran him off the racetrack that day. Really nice horse, 7-5, short price, coming off of a victory against Florida bred competition last time out. But this horse is 5 for 6 winning, with the only loss being a second to Ways and Means. Hard to really beat this one, I think, in this race. But interested if you're trying to find somebody to maybe upset.
Yeah, it's hard to knock her given what she's done so far. And I think I wouldn't be too concerned the fact that she came back against Florida Breds and it was a much slower figure.
Yeah.
She beat them pretty handily. And she also did not kind of blast out and wire the field like she's tried to do previously. So I thought that was encouraging that she showed a little bit more of a dimension, but she's fast. And I think, it's one of those races that she's eligible. Why not go and run in a race like that? For Nick Style, being a Florida bred, was actually her first time since she won that allowance at the start of her career that she was back running against Florida bred competition. She's very much the horse to be. I respect Dazzling Blue coming in for Brad Cox. I think the blinkers on is going to be interesting for her because she's one of those horses that started her career so strong and then she just doesn't win. She's always right there and she just struggles to seal the deal. And so I'm guessing that the addition of those blinkers is to help her have a little bit more punch in the stretch.
Yeah, and she's a horse that I know Andy Serling used to talk about sometimes even going into last year's campaign of, she was a little bit of a one-figure horse. That Victory Ride was that big effort, the 94 buyer, and you looked at the other efforts kind of sandwiched around that. And it was a lot of, from a buyer speed figure standpoint, kind of mid to low 70s. And then she's kind of slowly crept up and run some mid 80 buyer speed figures last year in the winning colors. But you're right, just hasn't really become the winning type in terms of turning those seconds and thirds into victories after starting her career a perfect 3 for 3. So, I almost kind of have to take a wait and see approach to see if the blinkers work, especially at a 3-to-1 price. You're still, it's going to be the clear kind of second choice in this field. So hard to really take too much of a swing here. Miuccia for Gustavo Delgado on the far outside is second back from a little bit of a layoff. Has run well at times, does have some big speed figure numbers, particularly that 92 in this year's Prioress with Brightwork and Too Sharp. So interesting if that horse could potentially run back to something. But it's going to be a tough one to, I think, try to beat Nick Style in this race.
I agree. I think that she's going to be very tough to beat, and she is the horse to beat, rightfully so, with her credentials. I kind of need the wait and see approach off the layoff with Muccia. She does come back. She has it in her, but like you said, she's not necessarily the most consistent as far as those figures are concerned. I thought at a big price, the one Opus 42 is a little bit interesting underneath. She's cutting back in distance, and I think she's a bit of a tough read because the last time she went 7 furlongs was at Charlestown. I always find it very hard to read how horses handle that track.
Yep.
7 furlongs is not a typical kind of 7 furlong race. Prior to that, the other 7 furlong try was in the Grade 2 Beaumont. Maybe it was a bit tough. It was also her only start with the blinkers on. Maybe it just not really her game. And I had notes from the beginning of her career when she first stretched out that I was wondering if longer from a physical perspective was really better. And she's been very good. She had a nice win in the Wayward Last, 2 back for Arnaud Delacour. So I thought she was a little bit intriguing on the cutback, maybe at a big price just to use underneath.
No, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned this horse because this is one who really does like Tampa Bay Downs quite a bit. 3 for 4 career winning at the track, and I agree with you. I remember her winning that Gasparilla back in 2023, and kind of thinking, "Oh, this will be a nice sprinter." And then they started stretching her out shortly thereafter, and will be interesting to see now cutting back to 6 furlongs. Yeah, I mean, as long as she breaks well from that inside rail, gets kind of a good trip. We'll see. But I think that one is 12-to-1 certainly is worth a shot, even if you just include this one and maybe some vertical exotics like an exacta or trifecta. So should be a fun race. But let's turn to the prep races on the card, and that is the Suncoast first for the Kentucky Oaks, and then of course the Sam F. Davis for the Kentucky Derby. And the Suncoast Stakes going off at race number 9 on the card, and this is one going a mile and 40 yards for 3-year-old fillies. A field of 8, and you have a couple of interesting horses that we've seen this summer at Saratoga. We've heard a lot about La Cara, Italian Soiree. You also have Whit Beckman's horse, Her Laugh, coming off a nice win. I don't know about you. For me, La Cara is going to be a play against. I just don't know what type of horse she is going to end up being. I just have some questions. I remember a couple of years ago, Mark Casse brought a horse like Wonder Wheel into this race, and she lost and kind of maybe, needed a little bit of time. But going to be interesting to see this one. But I feel like a good betting race in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is. It's a really interesting race. And it definitely, like you said, it is a little bit reminiscent of a Wonder Wheel with La Cara coming back. Obviously, Wonder Wheel, a Breeders' Cup winner, and she was in that kind of notorious Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies race that really nobody went on from, which was just wild. So I don't think that I don't think that it's going to be kind of to that level for sure.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see her come back because she does have a lot of foundation, and she has also experience going a distance, whereas you have several other horses that are going to stretch out in distance for the first time. But it will be interesting to get a chance to see them all line up. Her Laugh for Whit Beckman was entered a couple weeks ago at Oaklawn, was an early scratch before the Martha Washington, and so shows up here instead. So I don't know if it's kind of, this wasn't the first plan. They were looking for another option. I don't know what the situation there was, but giving her a little bit more time and she comes back in this spot. But I thought her race races so far were pretty strong, especially that untappable win at the fairgrounds. And then
Yep.
Italian Soiree, who started out on the dirt and then was switched to the turf and is now coming back to the main track and blinkers on, just like so many changes with her as well. So I think it's all kind of who steps forward. There's a lot of unknowns in this race.
There are a lot of unknowns. No, you're absolutely right. And usually when I see something like that, I want to try to find a little bit of a price. And yeah, I mean, her laugh could be, could just kind of get out up front as she has done before and wire the field. She has the versatility to also sit off the pace as she did in debut. I do think the number 5 Junta is a little bit interesting. The daughter of Constitution. And I always do have some questions, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this. You see a sire like Constitution that has a pretty high standing price, and then you see one of their offspring sell for less than the standing price, and you go, is that a little bit of a red flag? But she broke her maiden in debut going 7 furlongs over this track, very professional effort. Usually when you see those horses breaking at 7 furlongs, it assumes they can go a little bit longer. Maybe this horse could step forward, earned a 72 buyer speed figure that day. These are kind of lower percentage connections that you're probably going to get overlooked a little bit, and you're going to get a pretty big price on a horse like Junta. So I thought she was at least a little bit interesting as a play, even underneath.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those races that, kind of what we were talking about, that you don't really want to take anybody at a very short price in this race. And Junta was a daughter of Constitution, sold at the OBS June 2-year-old in training sale after working 10 flat. And like you said, kind of a moderate price given that pedigree and especially given that workout, but does deliver at first asking, which at this point in the game, now that she has a race under her belt, I think is what really matters more in the way that she ran and the way that she performed first time out. Obviously, with the Constitution influence, a little added distance shouldn't hurt her. She seemed like she had plenty left in the tank in that first race as well. I thought she was very intriguing. I completely agree, because kind of the other favorites that we talked about, I think they have their questions to answer. I don't think Lacara is is a slam dunk. I know that she's a graded stakes winner, but it wasn't, it was in the Pocahontas. It wasn't the most impressive, dazzling performance yet. So she's not necessarily kind of the one. I do remember Maggie Wolfendale saying that she was just waiting for her to get more experience and get more distance. So the fact that she took a while to break her maiden, she might have been one of those horses that maybe physically was ready, but she just needed more ground to do so. And they just don't write races like that early on in the meet, which is why sometimes you'll actually see trainers enter horses that have much more of a dirt pedigree early on in 2-year-old races on the turf, because they get to go a little bit longer.
Right.
Maybe they run on grass, maybe you hope it comes off. But she, I think with Lacara, just needed a little bit more time and a little bit more distance. So that's not a big concern. Obviously, she didn't run well in the Breeders' Cup. I hope she comes back and it is an exciting, dazzling performance this weekend. But I think that I'm excited to see them in the paddock, because as of now, I really don't know where I would land in this race.
Yeah, I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts. The one other horse, the number 8 Chloe for Victor Barboza Jr. This one broke its maiden sprinting 5.5 at Gulfstream Park in the Tapeta, sired by Tiz the Law. And one of the things we've seen with these Tiz the Law runners is they like going long, and they're doing well going long, whether it's on the dirt or on the turf. So I'm be interested to see kind of the physicals there, and whether or not this one really just looks like a sprinter that is, hey, they're taking a shot and let's just see what happens, or if this one maybe looks well meant for going 2 turns. Certainly looked impressive in that debut. Sammy Camacho up on the mount, but going to be a fun race. And again, I think a really good betting race in the Suncoast Stakes. But speaking of good betting race, 10 horse field, Sam F. Davis Stakes, 1 mile and a 16th, Kentucky Derby prep, 20 points to the winner. And we have a field of 10. Your morning line favorite, Owen Almighty, coming out of the Pasco, where he got disqualified after crossing the finish line first. But you also have a horse like John Hancock for Brad Cox, who is very much so fits the profile of a horse like Tappan Street, who we saw run second last week in the Holy Bull, who was a first out maiden winner and now is stepping up into this competition. I think Chad Brown, Treaty of Rome, is very interesting. And then obviously a horse that we saw up here in New York, Poster, now going back down for Owen Hardy. So wide open race. I feel like you can catch a couple prices in this one. Acacia, interested in your thoughts as you've gotten to see some of these horses in different spots over the last couple of months.
Yeah, I know Owen Almighty is the morning line favorite, and while he was disqualified, and I can certainly understand the call in that Pasco, and he was best in there, I do not want any part of him going at 2 turns. I know that Brian Lynch has said he felt that he could effectively stretch out. I had written down, just from what I saw from him, really felt like a mile was the max. He looked much more just built like a 2 turn horse. He has speed. The blinkers are going on. I'll be curious to see what type of blinkers he's wearing, because
Hmm.
when you look at that disqualification in the Pasco, he to my eye, I thought that he had kind of switched to his inside lead early on the turn. Horses will naturally switch to their inside or left lead on the turns, and then ideally in the stretches and straights will go to their outside right lead. I thought he had switched leads early, and he kind of had his head turned early on. And I was watching him warm up, and he was even kind of fighting. Irad Ortiz had his head turned even warming up
Oh,
early
interesting.
on. So he's not an easy horse to keep straight as well. And so I'll be curious what kind of equipment he's outfitted with those blinkers, if there's any sort of bit change or anything. I'll be having my eye on that. I just really do wonder about the distance, especially as I think the waters get much deeper.
Yeah.
Today, or I should say Saturday, versus in that Pasco. I think John Hancock is intriguing. I got to speak to Brad Cox this week at Tampa Bay Down, or at Payson Park, I should say, and he said they elected to debut him at Tampa Bay Downs, thought it was a good spot to get him started, love the timing of the race, and on his pedigree, the way that he acts, the way that he trains, think that the added distance should be no problem for him at all. And then Treaty of Rome. I actually think Treaty of Rome is probably the quote unquote horse to beat,
Yeah.
because he ran, I thought, exceptionally well in the Mucho Macho Man. And Chad Brown told me this morning that he considered running him in the Holy Bull, thought that the extra week coming here to the Sam Davis really suited him very well, and that was going to be beneficial for him. And with the foundation, those back-to-back mile races, not to mention his pedigree, should be absolutely fine with the 2 turns as well. And I think he's kind of the one that they have to get around.
Well, I feel better after listening to you because I just turned in my analysis for NYRA Bets on the Sam F. Davis, and my top choice is Treaty of Rome in this race. I thought, he was making up ground on a very leg weary Guns Loaded in that Mucho Macho Man, and we saw that horse at Guns Loaded come back and not run particularly well in the Holy Bull, but I didn't think he was. I know the pedigree says one thing, but just watching that horse run makes me think he's a sprinter and not really a 2 turn horse. And so him fading back, I don't think is any sort of indictment on the quality of him going around 1 turn, which is where Treaty of Rome almost tracked him down. And he was alone on the lead that day, Guns Loaded was. And so Treaty of Rome really made up that ground despite relatively soft fractions for Gulfstream Park standards, going a 1 turn mile. I think this one absolutely is going to like continuing to stretch out and is, if I'm not mistaken, the full sibling to a former dirt route winner, a greatest stakes dirt route winner. So a lot to like there. And John Hancock, my only note on this horse is sired by Constitution. The mare is Scribbling Sarah. I understand you want to name the horse after somebody who signed the Constitution. The problem, of course, is John Hancock did not sign the Constitution.
I know.
Declaration of Independence. I have some notes. If you talk to Brad Cox about it this weekend, just say, listen, it's maybe not too late to make a change on the name. Maybe, change it to Roger Sherman, change it to Alexander Hamilton. I don't know. We can come up with some other names.
I know.
But
a
very smart name.
Yeah. And what about Poster?
Well, right. I mean, I think this is a horse that was such an X factor last time out in that Remsen ran so well that day, came from off the pace, and had only had those 2 starts on the turf. But prior to that, I love that Munnings Tappet combination where you have the Munnings up top and you have out of a Tappet mare underneath. And so you'd imagine the distance, you have the speed and the distance kind of combined. This horse has the right sort of running style, because I think there's going to be a fair amount of pace in this race with a horse like Camp Hale, Dr. Ruben M., John Hancock, Owen Almighty. All these horses like to be forward. So a horse like Poster coming from off the pace should be nice. The problem is I don't really know who he beat in that Remsen. That is kind of the antithesis of last year's Remsen a little bit, where we had Sierra Leone and Dornick and all these really domestic product and all these great horses. And this year we saw a horse like Studley Do Right run back and not run particularly well. Tux run back, not run back particularly well. We haven't really seen Aviator Guy since then. Same thing with Key Waden. So I don't know how good the competition was that day. I'm probably, out of all the top contenders, I'm probably going to try to omit him from my tickets. But, Owen Hardy at Tampa usually does a pretty good job down there. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited to see him. I was in Jamaica on Cigar Mile Day, so I
Oh,
did
yeah,
not
that's
see
right.
him in the Remsen. So I'm excited to lay eyes on him this weekend and see how he stacks up. But yeah, this is the proverbial time when the cream rises to the top when the 3-year-olds are concerned.
Absolutely. And I will give out a little bit of a shout to a huge price in this race, which is Camp Hale, the number 1 horse for Ian Wilkes. Ian, of course, was the trainer at Burnham Square who won the Holy Bull last week. So great to see that barn getting some attention here on the Derby Trail. But this horse is 20-1, is still a maiden, finished second, 3 straight times, but has lost to some pretty nice horses. In debut, lost to David of Athens, who was an upset winner that day, but finished ahead of Patch Adams, Ain't No Disco, and T-Craft, who all came back to win eventually. Then next time out, loses to Guns Loaded, who we talked about. And then last time even losing to Grande, who's a pretty well-met Todd Pletcher runner. So, I don't know. The horse hasn't done a lot wrong and is going to get inside trip, has good early speed. Could the horse, and the other thing we haven't talked about is Tampa, they tend to have a pretty speed favoring track this time of year. So you get out up on the front end, you never know what could happen.
Yeah, it did seem like in the last couple weeks that you did really want to be forwardly placed. And I do think a lot of it does come down to trip, and it will make a difference though with some of these horses stretching out to go the 2 turns for the first time if they use that speed, if they're able to sustain it that far.
Yeah, absolutely. Acacia, thank you so much. I know you have a busy week down there in Florida with all the coverage we're doing at Tampa Bay, but thank you so much for taking time and joining me on Snowbirds today. And let the folks remind the folks again when you're going to be on TV for this weekend's coverage.
Yep, Saturday we'll have Aqueduct, Oaklawn, and Tampa Bay Downs. So stacked show from 3 to 6 on FS2.
So busy. I know when I'm at work, I look up. We're at a different track all the time. I don't know who's on TV.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. And so I usually have to just go to the simulcast feed, and I can't. It's too much. But going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button on NYRA Bets YouTube today to get all of our race previews, full card analyses, special programming, as well as horse racing, handicapping, and petting tutorials. For Acacia Clement, my name is Matthew DeSantis. Wish you a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.